I want to start this video a little differently than usual because this particular story hit me on a genuinely personal level as a longtime Lakers viewer, and I think once you hear exactly how this played out on air, you'll understand why. Brian Windhorst, appearing on a midday NBA segment, delivered the news with a specific kind of quiet certainty that longtime insiders reserve for stories they've been sitting on for a while. The topic: Kyle Kuzma has been traded from the Milwaukee Bucks back to the Los Angeles Lakers, and this specific reunion carries a genuinely different emotional texture than most trade stories, because Kuzma isn't just a talented role player joining a new team, he's a former Laker returning to finish out the story that started with him as a rookie on that Lakers championship roster years ago, back when he was a young, occasionally overconfident scorer trying to find his footing alongside genuine franchise legends. Let me give you the necessary context first, because understanding exactly how Kuzma became available matters here. The Bucks completely blew up their previous core this offseason, moving Giannis Antetokounmpo in a massive blockbuster trade that fundamentally reshaped their entire organizational timeline, and that kind of fundamental organizational teardown inevitably creates trade candidates out of every remaining veteran on an expiring contract. Kuzma, entering the final season of his current deal at just over $20 million, became exactly that kind of value-based trade chip once Milwaukee's rebuild officially began in earnest, with the front office clearly signaling their intention to accumulate draft capital and clear long-term financial commitments rather than continuing to carry veteran salary that no longer aligned with their new timeline. Here's exactly how Windhorst framed the report, and the specific language he used genuinely tells you everything about why this particular move makes complete sense on both sides. He stated directly that his sources within the Lakers organization confirmed this reunion had been quietly on the table for weeks, well before their pursuit of Jonathan Kuminga even collapsed, essentially functioning as their fallback insurance plan the entire time. Once Kuminga chose Minnesota over Los Angeles earlier this week, Windhorst specifically noted, the Lakers moved immediately and decisively to close this deal, recognizing that Kuzma represented genuinely their most realistic remaining path to finally filling that gaping power forward hole in their starting lineup, a hole that had persisted through essentially the entire offseason despite pursuing multiple other alternatives across the trade and free agent markets. The reaction from inside the Lakers locker room came quickly, and this one genuinely carried unique emotional resonance given Kuzma's specific history with this exact franchise. One of the Lakers' current players, who actually overlapped briefly with Kuzma during his previous tenure, posted a message specifically referencing how much easier it becomes to build genuine offensive rhythm with a returning veteran who already understands this exact organizational culture and this exact city's unique pressure, rather than integrating a completely unfamiliar new addition from scratch. That's a specific experience-based reaction that tells you the current players genuinely understand the value of organizational continuity, even when the actual on-court talent upgrade might look modest on paper compared to some of the bigger names connected to the Lakers throughout this entire offseason. Several other players around the league, including some who played alongside Kuzma during his various stops since leaving Los Angeles, also chimed in publicly, generally praising his professionalism and his willingness to accept whatever role a new organization asks of him, which is exactly the kind of veteran flexibility a crowded Lakers roster genuinely needs right now. Now here's the whiplash moment for this particular story, because just a couple of years ago, most Lakers fans had essentially closed the book entirely on Kuzma ever returning to this specific franchise, given how his departure years earlier had been characterized by genuine mutual relief on both sides, following some very public frustration about his role and his fit within the team's broader championship aspirations at the time. Watching that narrative completely reverse itself to the point where he's now being specifically pursued as a value-based reunion candidate genuinely tells you something important about how differently front offices evaluate players once actual roster necessity enters the equation. Sometimes the exact player you thought you'd permanently moved past becomes exactly the solution you desperately need years later once circumstances shift enough to make an old fit feel new again. Kuzma himself has grown significantly as a player and as a professional since his departure, developing into a more well-rounded two-way contributor across multiple different organizational environments, each one presumably teaching him something new about what it actually takes to sustain a long, productive NBA career beyond his early, more self-focused years as a rising young scorer. Windhorst gave 3 specific reasons for his confidence in this report, and each one adds real depth to understanding why this deal came together the way it did. First, he specifically cited direct conversations with Bucks front office personnel who confirmed they had been quietly shopping several of their remaining veterans, with Kuzma's expiring contract representing exactly the kind of clean, low-complication trade chip that accelerates a genuine rebuild without entangling Milwaukee in complicated long-term salary commitments they simply don't want as they retool their entire organizational approach. Second, he pointed to the specific financial mechanics involved, noting that absorbing Kuzma's expiring salary genuinely fits the Lakers' broader long-term timeline significantly better than committing to any multi-year contract would have, preserving crucial future financial flexibility as they continue building out the roster around Doncic's eventual second contract negotiations. Third, and this is genuinely the detail I found most compelling, he mentioned that Kuzma himself had reportedly expressed real, genuine excitement about the opportunity to return specifically to Los Angeles at exactly this stage of his career, rather than continuing to be a peripheral piece in a rebuilding situation in Milwaukee that genuinely wasn't positioned to compete for anything meaningful this season or in the foreseeable future. Predictably, Stephen A. Smith brought his own skeptical take once this story hit the broader national conversation, and I think his specific critique deserves genuine engagement. He specifically questioned whether Kuzma's individual production has actually declined enough in recent seasons that this reunion represents little more than nostalgic sentiment overriding genuine basketball logic, arguing that the Lakers might simply be settling for a comfortable, familiar name rather than continuing to pursue a genuinely impactful long-term solution at power forward. He specifically pointed out that Kuzma's shooting efficiency has fluctuated significantly across his various stops since leaving Los Angeles, and that relying on nostalgic organizational fit rather than genuine current production represents exactly the kind of sentimental decision-making that has occasionally burned front offices throughout league history. The reasonable counter to that critique is that Kuzma's specific skill set, the ability to create his own offense, knock down perimeter shots, and defend capably enough to hold his own against a variety of front court matchups, genuinely fits exactly what this current Lakers roster needs to complement Doncic's downhill playmaking and Reeves' off-ball scoring gravity. Sometimes a comfortable, proven fit genuinely beats an unfamiliar swing for the fences, especially this deep into an offseason with genuinely limited remaining alternatives on the open market. There's also a real argument that Kuzma's specific familiarity with the Los Angeles media environment and the unique pressures of playing for this exact franchise gives him a genuine advantage in avoiding the kind of early season adjustment struggles that completely new additions sometimes experience when navigating this market's specific intensity for the first time. Let's talk about the human side of this trade, because Kuzma's specific career arc carries genuine emotional weight worth acknowledging here. Returning to the exact organization where he began his career, now older, more experienced, and genuinely humbled by everything that's happened to him professionally since his original departure, represents exactly the kind of full-circle moment that resonates deeply with longtime fans who watched his entire journey unfold in real time, from his early days as a promising rookie, through his departure amid genuine public frustration, through his subsequent stops with other organizations, and now, back to where it all started. There's a genuine narrative satisfaction in watching a player complete that specific circle, especially one who has publicly acknowledged growing significantly as both a player and a person since his initial Lakers tenure ended. Let's also spend real time discussing the specific tactical questions this reunion raises for head coach JJ Redick, because integrating Kuzma effectively requires genuine thought about exactly how his skill set complements the existing roster, rather than simply assuming his familiarity with the organization automatically translates into seamless on-court chemistry. Kuzma has historically thrived with genuine offensive touches and opportunities to create for himself, which creates an interesting tactical question about how Redick balances his need for offensive involvement against the reality that Doncic and Reeves will remain the primary offensive engines on this roster. If Kuzma can genuinely accept a more complementary role, focusing on spot-up shooting and opportunistic scoring rather than trying to recapture his previous larger offensive role, this reunion could work beautifully. If he struggles with that specific adjustment, the fit could prove more complicated than the initial excitement suggests. Now let's address the honest risk here, because I want to be completely fair in evaluating this trade. Kuzma's specific defensive consistency has genuinely fluctuated throughout his career, and there's real uncertainty about whether he can provide the kind of stable, reliable frontcourt presence this Lakers roster genuinely needs on a nightly basis, rather than simply flashing occasional strong performances mixed with real defensive lapses that opposing coaching staffs will absolutely try to exploit throughout an entire lengthy season and any subsequent playoff run. Let's also spend real time discussing what this move means for Milwaukee's broader rebuilding timeline going forward. Moving off Kuzma completes their transition toward full asset accumulation, giving their front office additional flexibility as they continue building around whatever young core eventually emerges from their post-Giannis reconstruction. From Milwaukee's perspective, extracting even modest value for an expiring veteran contract represents exactly the kind of sound asset management that rebuilding organizations should prioritize, rather than risking him simply walking away for nothing once his contract expires at season's end. Let's also address the calendar pressure specific to this trade, because with training camp opening imminently, the Lakers genuinely needed to resolve their remaining roster uncertainty before opening night, and closing this deal now, immediately after their Kuminga pursuit officially ended, represents exactly the kind of decisive, opportunistic roster management that prevents a team from entering the season with unresolved questions at a critical starting position. Every additional week spent searching for alternatives would have meant less actual practice time for Kuzma to integrate into Redick's specific offensive and defensive systems before real regular season games actually began counting. Let's also talk about how quickly this story generated genuine excitement across Lakers social media, specifically because of the sentimental homecoming angle, which tends to resonate significantly more with fan bases than purely transactional roster additions ever do. Longtime Lakers fans who remember Kuzma's rookie season fondly, despite whatever frustration eventually developed around his departure, have generally reacted with genuine warmth to this specific reunion, viewing it as a fitting conclusion to a story that never quite got the ending anyone expected back when he first left the organization. Let's also consider the specific financial angle here in more depth, because taking on an expiring contract rather than committing to a multi-year deal genuinely preserves crucial flexibility for the Lakers as they navigate the extraordinarily complex financial reality of eventually needing to pay Doncic his maximum second contract while also maintaining enough roster flexibility to continue competing at a high level around him. Every decision this front office makes right now needs to be evaluated through that broader lens of long-term financial sustainability, and Kuzma's specific contract structure genuinely fits that broader strategic framework significantly better than many of the other alternatives previously connected to the Lakers throughout this offseason. So let me bring this one home.